Hello, fourth graders. Today we are talking about punctuation and using commas. This is what a comma looks like. And our objective is that you will be able to punctuate with commas in series, which are lists, and phrases using doodle notes, which will be uploaded to Seesaw. Commas separate ideas and set off special elements and quotations. Commas are used with lists, with addresses, dates, and titles, with dependent and independent clauses, with non-essential clauses, phrases, and words, for introductory clauses, phrases, and words, and to separate adjectives. Today we're going to be focusing on with lists and with dependent and independent clauses, and for introductory clauses, phrases, and words. So let's start off with commas with lists. Rules for using commas with lists. Commas are used to separate items when there are two or more nouns in a list. So two or more items in a list is when we use commas. So for example, such as cats, comma, dogs, comma, lizards, comma, or mice. Or even spaghetti, comma, salad, comma, garlic rolls, comma, and desserts. These commas separate these items from each other. If the commas weren't there, they would be one item. So it would look like cats, dogs, without the comma in between them. And it would be like if a cat and a dog were mixed together. That would be a little weird. So we need to have that comma there so that we know that they're two separate things. It's a cat and a dog, not a cat dog. And then we have pencils, comma, books, comma, erasers, and homework. These are some examples of how commas separate in a list. And then we have a comma is before the word and or at the end of a list. So always remember that the comma comes before and or, and it never comes after and or. So for example, tomorrow is going to be hot, comma, sunny, comma, and dry. And then our third example shows us that do you want to listen to rock music, comma, jazz, comma, or pop music? So remember, anytime there's an and or an or, the comma comes before that word. Now, independent and dependent clauses. What are independent and dependent clauses? Well, independent is a group of words that contains a subject and a verb, and it makes sense on its own as a sentence. Just like an independent person doesn't need anybody else, an independent clause does not need any other words or sentences to make sense. It can stand on its own. So for example, Jane ate pasta. That can be its own sentence. And Sam went to the park can be its own sentence as well. But then we have our dependent. And dependent relies on something else. And so it's a group of words that contains a subject and a verb, and it does not make sense on its own as a sentence. It is not a complete sentence. And so an example of that is because she was hungry, or after he finished school. Those don't make sense by themselves. So dependent always needs an independent, but an independent does not need a dependent. So again, independent clauses have a complete thought. It could be a complete sentence. And a dependent clause is not a complete thought on its own and is not a complete sentence. So commas with dependent clauses. When a dependent clause comes at the beginning of a sentence, a comma is always needed. So for example, when I went to the store is a dependent clause. And so we need a comma after when I went to the store because that is not a complete sentence on its own. So our independent clause comes after. I didn't buy any bread. So our dependent is relying on our independent clause here. So when I went to the store, comma, I didn't buy any bread. I didn't buy any bread could be its own complete sentence. So we need that comma there after the dependent to connect them together for it to make sense. If a dependent clause occurs in the middle of an independent clause, then the comma is needed before the clause and after it. So remember, the dependent clause, if it's in the middle, it needs two commas, one before and one after, such as the example, my neighbor, comma, who lives on the second floor, comma, is going to take me to school tomorrow. Commas with independent clauses. There are two types of words that can be used as connectors at the beginning of an independent clause: a coordinating conjunction and an independent marker, or we'll call it transition words. So a coordinating conjunction is connecting words at the beginning of an independent clause, and those are for, and, nor, but, or, yet, and so. So remember, if you see for, and, nor, but, or, yet, and so, we know that those are connecting words at the beginning of an independent clause. And when the second independent clause in a sentence begins with a coordinating conjunction, a comma is needed before the coordinating conjunction. So a comma is needed before these words, before the connecting words, for, and, nor, but, or, yet, and so. For example, Jim studied in the cafeteria for his language arts quiz, comma, but it was hard to concentrate because of the noise. So anytime you see the word but, yet, so, and, or for, you will need a comma. Commas with introductory clauses. Introductory clauses should be followed by a comma. What are introductory clauses? Well, it can look like while I was eating, comma, the cat scratched at the door. However, don't put a comma after the main clause when a dependent clause follows it, such as the cat scratched at the door, comma, while I was eating. So if you had flipped those two phrases, then you would not use a comma. So while I was eating, comma, the cat scratched at the door. You need that comma there because there's an introductory clause. But if the main clause is followed by a dependent, then you do not need that comma, such as the second example, which is incorrect. The cat scratched at the door, comma, while I was eating. So commas with introductory phrases. Common introductory phrases should be followed by a comma. And the example of that is, having finished the test, comma, he left the room. To get a seat, comma, you'd better come early. And after the test, comma, I went jogging. So these can't stand on their own as its own sentence. So having finished the test, if I put a period there, that would not make any sense. To get a seat would not make any sense as its own sentence either. So I need what comes after the comma. I need something after my introductory phrase. So I have that comma there to separate them. So having finished the test, what do I do after having finished the test? He left the room. To get a seat, what do you do to get a seat? You better come early. And after the test, what happens? I went jogging. I need that comma to separate my introductory phrase. So commas with introductory words. Common introductory words that should be followed by a comma include yes, however, and well. So if you ever see yes, however, and well, you know that a comma is coming after. So here are some examples. Well, comma, perhaps he meant no harm. Yes, comma, the package should arrive tomorrow morning. And however, comma, you may not be satisfied with the results. These are introductory words that should be followed by a comma. And then the comma and the and sign. An and sign is also called an ampersand, and an and sign is used mainly in company names and informal writing. What is informal writing? Informal writing is when you are writing very casual and you're writing to friends or just really close family members. But when you are doing formal writing, you're writing to someone very important, like your boss or a principal, or maybe even the president. You're writing to someone who's very important, and so you want to use correct English and language, and you wouldn't be using signs like the ampersand. So an example of using the ampersand, the and sign, and a company name is Crown & Co., Ben & Jerry's Ice Cream, or even AT&T. No comma before an ampersand in a series, and here's why. The ampersand can be used to indicate that the and in a listed item is a part of the item's name and not a separator. So it actually combines two things together to make one. So here's my sentence. My 5 favorite things in life are rock and roll, cake and ice cream, and Taylor Swift. The and sign there connects rock and roll together to make one, which is one type of music. And then cake and ice cream, which is one type of dessert. It's cake with ice cream. They're not separate, they're together. But then you see I have a comma, and then it says and Taylor Swift, so you know Taylor Swift it's her own thing. She's not mixed with anything else. But if I took away that comma from between ice cream, comma, and Taylor Swift, and I replaced the comma with an ampersand with the and sign, then it would look like ice cream and sign and Taylor Swift. That would mean that Taylor Swift has ice cream all over her. That would be one of my favorite things, was Taylor Swift with ice cream all over her. That would be really weird. So I need that comma there so that you know that it's two separate things. It's ice cream and then Taylor Swift by themselves, not together. And now let's look at some questions. Which of the following sentences punctuated correctly? In the end, comma, Martha decided to go to summer camp. Or in the end, Martha decided to go to summer camp without the comma after end. Take a second to guess which one is written correctly. If you chose A, you are correct. In the end, comma, Martha decided to go to summer camp. In the end needs that comma there because it is separating from the introduction and Martha decided to go to summer camp. And if I just had in the end by itself, that wouldn't make any sense. So I need that comma to separate those two phrases. So number 2, which of the following sentences is punctuated correctly? Open your folder, take out your homework, and pass it forward. You can see that there are commas separating in A, and there are no commas separating in B. So which one would be punctuated correctly? It's A. Because when you're listing, you need commas to separate what you're listing so that it doesn't combine all together. So here is a command that someone's saying, open your folder, then take out your homework, and then pass it forward. These are a series of things that you're doing, and they're listed, so you need a comma to separate them. And number 3, which of the following sentences is punctuated correctly? Mario likes to play football, tennis, baseball, and volleyball. Is it A or B that's punctuated correctly? It's A, because A has the commas in the right place. If you look at letter B, we do not have a comma after baseball, and so it could be baseball and volleyball as one thing. We could have combined those two to make like one sport, which would be a little weird because baseball and volleyball are two separate sports. So we need that comma there to separate, and so we always have the comma after and, before and. We always have the comma before and. So it's Mario likes to play football, comma, tennis, comma, baseball, comma, and volleyball. Always have the comma before and or. And so which of the following sentences is punctuated correctly? Please take out the trash and don't forget to put the lid on the can. Is it A or B? It's A, because A has the commas in the correct place. B is incorrect because it kind of looks like it's listing, but it doesn't make any sense to be listed. So if you look at B, it says, please take out, comma, the trash, comma, and don't forget to put the lid on the can. That's not really much of a list, and it's just kind of commas put in the wrong place. So A is our correct answer. And now that we're done with our lesson, you'll go to Seesaw and go to our task cards. You're going to look for punctuation with commas task cards and complete those with at least a 70%. Thanks for watching. Bye.